Good. Okay. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of your favourite podcast. This week we interviewed Richard Waygood. We'll just give you a quick rundown of who Richard Waygood is.
Just in case you don't know. So Major Richard Waygood is the current world-class performance director of the eventing team.
Yeah. He was the chef de keep for the Team GB dressage team that won gold, all those golds at London.
Mm-hmm. He had spent 30 years in the Household Cavalry.
Yeah.
And in that time he became the riding master for the entire Household Cavalry and reinvigorated the musical ride.
Yeah. So he choreographed the musical ride that everyone will have seen at Windsor and Olympia and Horse of the Year show and everywhere else. And we talk a little bit about that in the interview. To date, he has supported 23 British Championship medals. So that's World Equestrian Game medals or Olympic medals. So I think that's amazing.
He's a bit of a legend, to be honest.
Yeah,
and we're so grateful that he allowed us to
turn up to his house
and interview him.
And meet all his
he was
spaniels.
Such a good sport.
So good.
So I really hope you enjoy listening to him and pick up some pearls of wisdom.
Yeah.
Come on, where we go?
Let's do this.
So first of all, start at the beginning. Could you talk to us a bit about the start of your riding career? What got you into riding and what ultimately led you to join the army?
So, really quite random. My father was a gamekeeper and he had a real passion for horses. Myself and my brother probably didn't have that same passion, although we were sort of dragged all around the countryside and around the country looking at horses. And he had at the time some ponies that he used to use for taking the pheasant feed out to the woods. And myself and my brother used to sling a leg over, ride them bareback round the field with a bran sack on their backs, mostly on a head collar. And we learned how to bounce, basically. So that was good. And then Dad had a few other horses, and I can remember going to do my first gymkhana. And I went and rode in one clear round show jumping, and I fell off. And anyway, a great friend of mine was always wanted to join the lifeguards, and I didn't really even know what the lifeguards were. So I went along with him in a recruiting office. And I basically ended up joining the Household Cavalry. And while I was applying to join, I actually wanted to join the REME and become a mechanic. And they said, well, down here you like animals and horses and dogs. And they said, how about the Household Cavalry? So that's why I ended up joining the Army and the Household Cavalry. I then went to Purbright, where I did a year's basic training, learning how to be a soldier. I got into the shooting team while I was there, so I stayed a little bit longer. And then I arrived in Hyde Park Barracks at Knightsbridge, where I started my 20-week riding course. And we did the first 6 weeks in Knightsbridge. And then on day 1 of week 6, we saddled up and we rode to Windsor from London.
God, that's a long drive.
Yeah.
That's a long ride.
So you completely learnt to ride in the Household Cavalry?
Basically, yes.
Wow.
So we did our first 6 weeks in London, then we rode to Windsor. We did our next 10 weeks in Windsor. And then when we passed out what we call car key ride, so we passed out in front of the commanding officer, that was walk, trot and canter in a ride, normally about 12 people. And an individual exercise in walk, trot and canter. And then down a jumping lane, old-fashioned jumping lane, no stirrups, hands on head, saluting to the right, taking your jackets off, shouting your name, rank and number.
Oh, God.
And then we rode back to London. So from Windsor straight into London. And then we started our next 4 weeks, where what they call the kit ride, where you learn how to ride in all the ceremonial uniform. And you added a bit of kit basically every day. So the first day you were taught how to ride on one hand, and then you kept working on one hand. The next day you had your helmet, then your cuirasses, then your sword, then your jack boots, and it kept going until you were in all of the uniform to ride on ceremonial parade.
Is it really uncomfortable riding in all of the kit?
The cuirasses, so the armour, are as hard as that table. And the saddles are exactly the same, really as hard as the table. But you do put a sheepskin over the saddles when you're riding in full ceremonial uniform, so that makes it a little bit padded and a bit more comfy. But the saddles are much better for the horse's back than they are for the riders.
What do you miss most about being in the army?
The camaraderie.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the ceremonial parades were amazing, and I got to do some amazing things. I've, to ride down the mile with another 160 horses and soldiers, and with the royal family or on state visits was incredible. I've done a state visit in Edinburgh, where we've taken 160 horses altogether with the band.
Wow.
And I've ridden up the Golden Mile, but I've also ridden down the Champs-Élysées in Paris.
It must be quite cool being in the middle of those streets when they're empty, because the Champs-Élysées especially is so busy, and being able to have all the traffic stopped and just ride down the middle must be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely cleared, and you'll be amazed how wide both the Mall and the Champs-Élysées are when they're clear.
With no one else on them. Yeah.
So when I lived in London, I went running in the mornings, and I lived near Victoria. And I'd go running at like 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah, so that there was no one there.
And no, because I had to go to uni, and the Mall would just be deserted.
Yeah,
so
it is an amazing sight. And then especially, with all of the crowds, the foot guards all stood down the street lining down the slide. I rode on Prince Charles and Diana's wedding, and that was incredible because when we were going down the Strand, it was as though people were throwing buckets and buckets of confetti out of the tall buildings above you. We were absolutely covered. Yeah.
It's amazing the horses deal with it. I did work experience at a vet's, and they had a horse it was the last horse to stand on the steps at Sandhurst, and it had come in for, I don't know, something. And they have cards outside their doors saying, like, it's not good with clippers, or it's not good with this. And his card was like, fine with firebombs, riots, like steps, cannons, everything. And then just at the end, at really small writing, it just said, not fine with clippers.
Most of the horses are bought from Ireland, and they're quite hard to find now because the Irish draft, as they were, nowadays people is breeding the modern sports horse. But remember, the Irish draft was designed to pull the farmer's cart, to take the farmer to church on a Sunday, to plough the field, and to go and have a day's hunting on. And that type's harder and harder to find. But I would say the horses in general have got a really good sense of humour.
Yeah. Obviously you rode around badminton. How did you find fitting the training for badminton in?
That was really hard because all through my army career, I had my military career, and I had to make sure what I told myself is make sure I did my military work better than anyone else. And then I'll get the support to go and do to fit the event in and around it. So I have actually ridden on the rehearsal for the Queen's birthday parade, which they call the string band rehearsal, which is early on the Thursday morning. And I think, I can't remember now the times, but it takes part sort of, you're in the stables mucking out at 1 o'clock in the morning. And I've ridden on the early morning rehearsal. We get back into barracks quite early before the traffic starts, and then I've jumped in the car and driven down to Windsor and ridden the Windsor 3 day and done my dressage test.
Wow, I loved Windsor. That's my favourite event.
Yeah, and then I've also, again on the Saturday, on what they call the first rehearsal for the Queen's birthday parade, ridden on the rehearsal, got back into barracks. You get back in at 5 to 1. And again, I've jumped in my car, driven down to Windsor, and gone cross country in the afternoon.
Oh God!
And, so those are the days when there was steeplechases and roads and tracks and everything. But the answer is, it was hard to fit in, but it was doable. But you had to make sure you did all your military work well. And then the army supported me, and household cavalry supported me really well. But I did make sure I did the work inside. And I also had my competition aspirations and my military aspirations. So you had to make sure there was a balance between the two. And if you look at generally with event riders, they've got to look at their competition aspirations, but then they've also got to fulfill their business aspirations to make sure they're able to compete.
Yeah. What happened to allow you to take over the musical ride?
So when I arrived in Knightsbridge, I arrived and I was 16 stroke 17 years old, and the instructors who would take us, they were called the riding staff, and I decided almost immediately I wanted to get onto the riding staff. And that's where I really learned how to ride, because you did your normal troop stuff, rode on all the ceremonial parades. There was the chances to show jump into cross country. But I then, when I got onto the riding staff, I had to go to Melton for a 7-month course. And it was a 7-month course to teach you how to ride. I'd already done my basic riding course, but teach you how to ride. And you rode 3 horses a day. You rode 1 trained horse. There was normally an ex-event horse that could, do all the lateral movements. You rode 1 half-trained horse, and then you rode 1 what they call remount, and that was an unbroken horse, and you backed it and rode it away. So you rode 3 a day, and you had 2 lectures a day, and you had to look after 1 of the horses yourself, and then every evening you either had lectures or you wrote your other lectures up. And then you were also taught how to coach.
Oh wow!
So it was and then you had to pass that, and then you became a qualified riding instructor. But then you had to get onto the riding staff as well. And I was very lucky. I came back, got onto the riding staff, and of course that was my first goal, was to get onto the riding staff. And then the moment I got on the riding staff, I thought, I want to be the boss. I want to be the riding master. So that took me another 20 years, I guess, to become riding master. And then part of the role of the riding master is the musical ride. So as the riding master, you were responsible for buying all of the horses, training of all the horses, training of all the soldiers, choreography for the ceremonial parades, the choreography for the musical ride and the training for the musical ride. So all things equestrian basically within the regiment.
Wow.
So it was a great job, a huge job, really big job. But like I say, part of that job was the musical ride.
Cool. Because under your being in charge of the musical ride, you reinvigorated it and sort of took it to the next level.
Yeah, I was, like everything goes in cycles, and when I took the ride over, it was still a great county display. But for the indoor arenas, let's think of Olympia, Horse of the Year show. For the indoor arenas, it become dated. So the first thing I did is I got all the boys together and I said, right, come on, this is your ride as well as mine. Let's have some ideas. And one of the very early things I did is change the music. And we put modern music basically to the ride. Not only did we put modern music to it, I also did a couple of gigs where we actually did it to live music. So one was a lady called Victoria Yallop who dropped down from the ceiling between the AV screens on a stage, and we did it to Bond violin music, classical violin music, and she played live on hanging above the ride basically on the stage. And then Horse of the Year show, we did the ride to with a live rock guitar there, and we did it to live rock music, mostly Queen. Yeah. And then during that same performance, I had the lights cut out halfway through, and on the horse's legs we had fluorescent. They're called silence. You snap them and they glow. Yeah. And so all the lights went out, and all you could see were the horse's legs galloping around. And there's the whole crowd went, a great gasp from the crowd. Ooh. And then I later took that on, and I actually, when the ride came to the British Military Tournament, we used the watch straps that they have at Coldplay concerts. And
They change colour.
That's right. Halfway through the performance, we had the lights go out. We pressed the Wi-Fi button, and all the legs lit up.
Wow.
Yeah, and then we can chop them out. We can phase them in, phase them out. And then, to be honest with you, the flags, the galloping out at the end, that was a moment of inspiration when we'd been at Horse of the Year show rehearsing. And a lot of the time, the rehearsals couldn't take place till quite late at night, till all the classes or the setup finished. And then we had a production meeting after that. And at the production meeting, we sort of walked out of there, and I can remember walking back to my hotel in the NEC, which would have been at 1 o'clock in the morning. And I saw all of the flags of the Commonwealth hanging outside, and I thought, hang on a minute, that'd be a great idea to gallop out at the end to land in hope and glory with the flags. So
it's such an iconic moment of the ride.
And I've done that with Land of Hope and Glory, and then the Union flags, and then the actual Union flag itself. And so most people call it Union Jack, but the Union Jack flies on the ship, the Union flag flies on land, and we gallop out, and we've had shots of the audience with people just in floods of tears. When we first started doing it. So anyway, off the back of all of those sort of changes, and a lot of the changes weren't my idea. It was stimulating the boys. But off the back of those changes, we were then booked up all over the world. And we were turning foreign bookings down left, right and centre. And one of the most memorable was on the frozen lake at St Moritz.
Oh my God.
Which was quite spectacular with all the horses on the frozen lake performing.
Oh my goodness. How did you go from that to the organisational committee for Team GB?
Interesting, good question. When obviously I was still in the army. I left when I was 47, I think it was, and I could have actually stayed till I was 55, so I could have stayed for another 8 years, I think I left 46, 47. Actually, it was 46 that I was in the army for 30 years. Yeah. Wow. So I could have stayed for another 9 years or so. But I'm big believer in leave while you still want it. And so anyway, long and short is I was coming closer and closer to leaving. I knew that I could make a living out of my coaching. So I knew that was in the bag. I never really expected to ride again. It was only because I bought here and then suddenly had a few stables and people asked could they send horses down. I had 3 stables by the house. I then put in a couple of field shelters, and then I didn't even have a muck heap. But, went a little bit from there. But going back to the question, Richard Davison had a chat with me at the Horse of the Year show that he was, thinking of standing down as the performance manager for dressage. And, I didn't actually know that. We had a long chat about general things, chit-chat. And then a week or so later, I got a call from Will Connell after he'd been chatting to Richard. And then he said, is this something you'll be interested in? And the problem for me stepping into the dressage, it was a huge gamble. Because I was coming from the outside and coming into a sport which, I know how to do a half pass and teach a half pass. I know how to do a shoulder in, but the real technical skills of piaffe and passage, so those technical skills, and my job was about managing character, not the technical skills. You had subject matter experts that taught those technical skills. So we decided that, I was, obviously worried because it was, if it went wrong, it would have been, catastrophic for my career. And it would have been the same for those people that employed me because it was a big gamble.
Nothing like a bit of pressure.
Exactly, yeah. So I said, well, if I shadowed Richard Davison for the first, for a couple of months during the first season, at the end of that season, it was Europeans in Windsor So I went to did a few shows before that. Went to the Europeans at Windsor, and I said, let's all look ourselves in the eye afterwards and see if we think it can work. And the answer was we all agreed it could work, and I kicked on. And then it was fantastic. It was almost 8 years. So it was an amazing time working with real professionals at the top end, at the sharp end. But for me, it was a huge learning curve, a real big learning curve on the technical skills, to be honest. The sort of team leading bit. I've spent my life doing that in the military. But on the technical side, I came away just having soaked up so much. And then, look, of course, on the management side, with the leadership side there's lots of times when you have to think on your feet and act accordingly. But it was a wonderful moment to be part of that really exciting journey.
Yeah. And
it really was teamwork.
How did your move back over to eventing come about?
Well, I spoke to you earlier about aspirations. So I had, when I arrived in the army, I wanted to be soon realised I wanted to be a riding instructor and on the riding staff. As soon as I got onto the riding staff, I soon realised I wanted to be the riding master. When not long after that, I started eventing, and I didn't really event until I was about 21, 22. Fitted it in around the job, mostly military competitions. But then I thought, I want to go to badminton, and they all said I was crazy because doing it from the military and all the other bits and pieces. And then when I was partway through that journey, I looked at the sort of management roles in eventing, and this is ultimately where I wanted to be. So for me, it would be very wrong to say the dressage role was a stepping stone because they're both equal roles.
Yeah.
But it was I feel like I've learned so much from the dressage role about elite sport, and I've been able to bring those things to the eventing role. But quietly, it's been a dream of mine for many, many years. Yeah.
So obviously, eventing was originally designed as a test for cavalry horses. Do you think, having come from a cavalry background, you had any advantage over anyone else?
If I was born 30 years earlier, then I would absolutely say yes, because if you look at most of the
sports changed so much.
The Olympic teams then, most of the Olympic teams always had one, if not two, military riders in them. And it very much was a military sport in lots of ways. But when I joined, we were hanging on the tailcoats of that. So the answer is the army has taught me huge things about horses and what you can do, what you can't do, and I've learned a huge amount from it. But the sport is moved into a different stratosphere. Even in the last 5 to 10 years, it's a different level again. Yeah. And the quality of the dressage, for example, the way of going, the technicality of the cross-country and the show jumping courses. So the sport just keeps moving. I wonder where it could go in the next 10 years.
I do always look at cross-country courses and think, I'll look at cross-country courses now and think, God, they're so much more technical, they're so difficult. But then you look at like jumps and course pictures from like 30 years ago, and then some of the jumps are mental. There was a picture that Cheryl put up from Windsor, which is it's like a big bounce onto a bank and then a massive, huge drop off. But
That's right. I've got a picture again.
Yeah, madness. Some of the fences are stupid.
But I mean, it's big, it's brave, and it's technical now, isn't it? So, so big, brave, and technical. Whereas before you'd have to say, it was big and brave, but when the first skinnies came in, it's not stopped. Taking a step, but everything's to be honest with you, everything is come on, help me out with the word, girls. It's all 30 years ago, that's what you trained for. Now we train for something else. So everything's in balance, really.
Having been involved in both eventing and dressage, what would you say is the biggest difference between the riders and the horses?
Oh, that's a good question. What I learned from dressage is, first of all, in a test, in a dressage, they really have an influence over every footfall and have a really good feel, and that influences, they can use the hind leg and use it. What I've learned about eventing is actually eventing in the dressage area phase is getting that way. But at the same time, you've got to be able to allow your horse to be uphill and in self-carriage and be able to react and cope, because they do need a coping strategy when they go cross-country and be able to think for themselves. But it was the discipline in the dressage. The riders were very disciplined. The other thing is, as well, it taught me a lot about first impressions. So dressage riders are very conscious of the way they dress, the way they are, because the whole thing is about presentation. And if you can, you bring that over into the eventing, then the better. So presentation, mindset, and the discipline. When you with an eventing, there is got to be that slight. You've got to take a risk, and the risks come at a bigger price. So, and the camaraderie within the sport is amazing, because I think everybody understands at a high level that when you come out of that start box, you are taking risks. And what's really I always find amazing is at badminton, riders will openly share their experiences with other riders, and because they know how tough it is to get between the start and the finish.
I love hearing stories from people saying they've gone to events. I think it was Sam Watson saying he went to his first CCI 3-star at Bramham and asked Andrew Nicholson for help walking the course, and he was really happy to give it to him. You think they're competing against each other. You wouldn't expect.
Someone summed it up for me by saying that most equestrian sports, it's everyone against each other, whereas eventing, it's everyone against the course. So that you are competing against each other, but you're kind of all on the same team.
And I mean, there was really big camaraderie, and it's funny. It's quite close in lots of ways as it is in the army. Lots of similarities.
Which of your skills would you say are the most influential in your job as a team manager?
Oh gosh, I haven't got a clue. Bimble along. I think it's a really hard question, because what's right today isn't right tomorrow. And it's just being a little bit aware, and also knowing when to sort of, there's enough pressure around competitions anyway, that when riders don't want to go out and fail, they want to go out and win. So giving confidence, I guess, when it's really needed.
Having seen many riders come through the ranks and being involved at major competitions, do you think that talent is real, and what bearing do you think it has on an individual's success in the sport?
Now, this is one of my favourites. So
this is one we try to ask to everyone.
Okay, so
this was my question.
So again?
This was one of my questions.
Okay, that's a really good question. So you've got to. So I'm going to put this back to you in a slightly different way. Okay. Talent versus character. Okay. So you only need enough talent to get the job done. Happy with it?
Yeah.
So if a fence is 3 foot high, you've only got to jump it to clear it by 2 inches.
Yeah.
If the fence is 4 foot high, clear it by 2 inches. If the fence is 5 foot high, clear it by 2 inches. If you look at Mickey Young in Rio, his dressage marks were basically 7s and 7.5s from beginning to end. Didn't drop below that. So on that particular horse, on Sam, at that moment in that horse's career, it had enough to get the job done. Happy with that?
Yeah.
So that's talent. Yeah. Then I'm going to come back to talent in a second.
Okay.
So then character. Whether it's the equine athlete or the human athlete, so the horse or the rider, it's having the character on the field of play when under pressure to perform to your maximum.
Yeah.
And if you were to ask me which I would rather have or which is most important, character every time. And I put this to people as well, is when you drive home from an event, you can have a lorry load in the back and you'll be driving up the motorway and you'll have one horse that's super talented, but often they overjump a bit or they're a little bit hot in the head. But you know they've got all this talent, yet you're coming home and you've had a run out because the horse has overjumped a fence and you've missed a turn or whatever and it's cost you a run out.
Yeah.
Or it's got fresh in the dressage, well, you know it's got great paces, you know it's got all this ability, all this talent. Yeah, you look down at the dashboard and there's another first, second or third race out from the horse in the back that doesn't always super inspire, but it just does what it has to do.
The job.
But enjoys the job and always looks for the flags, looks for the way. Doesn't massively inspire you, but it has the character to A, be consistent, and B, to try its heart out for you and not let you down.
Yeah.
So that's my talent versus character. I would go character every time. Yeah. However, if you want me to give you an example where both were in abundance, and that's for Allegra.
Yeah.
Okay. So that horse had super talent and it had super character.
Yeah. I mean, we've all seen the video of that. The Carl's goddaughter riding it.
Yeah. No, it's
amazing.
an amazing horse.
Yeah.
You can go around that arena, and I've seen it trot round in the prize giving with an extended trot that you should get a 12 for. Yeah, I've seen it then break into walk out of the tunnel, and as it's walked out, Charlotte dropping him to the buckle end, and he's just looking for a sugar lump from Alan. I totally done my bit. Yeah, great. Yeah. Amazing. But that was, for me, that typifies super talent, super character.
Yeah.
It had both.
So, having seen also many different riders and met many different people, what's one thing you wish you'd learnt sooner?
Oh gosh.
It's another question we try to ask everyone.
Yeah, so many things. You know, I mean, the more time you spend in any sport, to be honest with you, in any sport, then the more you realise you don't know. And the more you work with horses, the more you realise you don't know. However, one thing that I would really hang my hat on is, and it goes for any sport, but especially equestrian, learn the basics. Get the basics right. And then in times of crisis, you just revert to the basics, and the basics will look after you.
Our final question was one sent in by one of our listeners, and it's what's your advice for boys or guys who want to get involved in the seemingly female-dominated environment of horses?
What's the advice to boys who want to get involved? Oh, just go for it. There's no secrets. If you want to do something, get on with it, you know? Don't look for excuses. I mean, really. I mean, there's, you know, it is a good question because it is, you know, obviously, and it's one of the very few sports where girls and boys can compete on a level terms. Yeah. But at the end of the day, there's nothing stopping. Go for it.
Yeah. Perfect.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us again.
I hope you enjoyed listening to that interview. We definitely enjoyed interviewing Richard.
Oh, so much. He was amazing. If you have anyone else you want us to interview, or if you have any questions for us,
then DM us on Instagram or message us on Facebook. We're at The Pony Podcast.
Yeah, or email us at theponypod@gmail.com.
As usual, don't forget to leave us a review and rate us on iTunes and Spotify.
Yeah, that helps other people find us. So that honestly, the more reviews we can get, the better, and the more people can enjoy our wonderful discussions and off-topic conversations.
Next episode, we'll be talking about another pony care episode on ailments.
Yeah.
So we'll be talking about the sweet itch that's coming into the summer and how to stop your pony from suffering from that.
Yeah.
So look forward to next time.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.